This episode is brought to you in part by DatsonParts.com. That's Datsun Parts with a Z.com. If you're looking for any Datsun related parts, please check and compare prices on DatsonParts.com first. One of the more frustrating parts of these old cars is actually finding the parts. Who creates them, who makes them, and who supplies them, and who has them for the best price. Luckily for you, myself, along with a few other YouTube Datsun lover enthusiasts, all had the same opinion. So we all got together and collaborated on this brand new website called DatsonParts.com. That's Datsun Parts with a Z.com. And it's basically a search engine to allow you to search for whatever part you need and have it drop down from a list of who has it in stock and for what price. That way you get the final say in where you're spending your money to rebuild these old cars and saving money along the way. That way you're spending less time actually researching where to find the parts, more time actually ordering the parts so you can actually put it on your car and get this thing back on the road. So before you go shopping anywhere else or compare on your own who has what for what price, please go ahead and visit DatsonParts.com. That's Datsun Parts with a Z.com. A lot of work has gone into it on the back end to get it to the point to where it is now, but that being said, we still have a lot of work to put into it to make it better as not only the channel grows, but as the website grows as well. So if you guys have any suggestions, any fixes, if there's a manufacturer currently not on the list, please drop it in the comments below and I'll do my best to get it uploaded as quickly as possible. That way you can have an additional price point to measure from, and we all can have additional parts to look at and search for when it comes to trying to get these things saved and back on the street. We think it's a very effective tool, and obviously it helps out our channel with bringing you more content, more Datsun, more first generation Z love. If you like this stuff, please click that thumbs up button. If you want to see more, go ahead and click that subscribe, turn your bell notifications on. That way you'll get a personal message just as soon as we post another video. Dang, that looks good. Well, I think the day has finally arrived where we are ready to do what we came here to do, and that is to fix the undercoating. Just to catch you up to speed, we're still working on our 1978 Datsun 280z. We tried to salvage the original undercoating. That was unsuccessful. We pressure washed it, degreased it several times, and then washed it some more, and it was just not coming back to its original color. Still had dirt and all kinds of debris embedded inside of the undercoating. That's not something we want on a finished product. So we decided to go ahead and strip it. We found several different ways to not strip it. And then we found some ways that did work. So the video with all of that information is gonna be right here. If you wanna watch, click. If you're interested in how to properly or improperly strip undercoating. The process does suck. It is not fun. And I would not recommend it ever at all. Don't do it. Just find something else to do on the car. We had to do it on this. We finished that up. We stripped it down to bare metal. Once it's in bare metal, you're not done. You still have to clean it, degrease it, and then prep everything to sand some more and make sure that metal has good mechanical adhesion, which means it has a rough enough surface for the paint to actually adhere. So we went ahead and got everything down to bare metal, and then we did a little bit of hand sanding and gave it good mechanical adhesion for that two-part epoxy primer to adhere to. Once that was completed, we sprayed 2 wet on wet coats of epoxy primer and let that cure overnight. On this project, we use what we always use, which is Southern Polyurethane's 2-part epoxy primer. It's very forgiving, and when you're working as a DIY guy in your own home shop, it's beneficial to use products that help you do what you're attempting to do. They're not a sponsor of this. They don't pay me for any of that stuff, so I just love using their crap. Once the 2 coats of epoxy primer were dry and partially cured, we went ahead and sealed all of the seams with seam sealer. Now we used 3M Fast and Firm seam sealer. It was beige in color. Not what I wanted, but it doesn't really matter because we threw another coat of epoxy primer on it anyway, which is what you want to do. You got to get it down to bare metal, throw epoxy primer on so you get good corrosion protection in between all the seams. And then you put seam sealer on top of properly prepped epoxy primer that is properly dried and partially cured. It takes about 7 days to cure, and I'm not going to wait 7 days because then we would have to scuff the whole surface again, and we're not going down that road. So the good thing with Southern Polyurethanes epoxy primer is if you get to what they call the recoat window, which is inside of 7 days, chemical cross-linking can still occur. And that's what we did with this. So first day, 2 coats, wet on wet. Second day, we came in here and seam sealed. We kept the garage at or above 65 the entire time, waited for the seam sealer to cure. Another 24 hours passed. We came in through our third coat of epoxy primer on top of that. We've given that over 24 hours to cure, kept the garage. It got a little bit cold here in the past couple days, so we kept the garage heated. We got our little torpedo heater in the background over there. We kept that set at 80 degrees. That doesn't mean the shop is going to stay 80 degrees. It just means that the air temperature is going to stay hopefully at or above 70, 75, which gives us a part metal temperature at or above 65 degrees. So do not get that confused with whatever you're working on. Just because your shop is 70 degrees or 65 doesn't mean the body or the panel is. Also, you got to pay particular attention to the actual product that you're spraying and making sure that's at or above 65 degrees as well. So naturally, if your garage is kept at outside temperature, which this one is unheated most of the year, then the paint is going to be cooler than what it needs to be to start that process of curing. So if it's at or below 65, it's not going to cure. It's only going to create problems for you in the future. So you're going to have to go ahead and warm up that 2-part epoxy primer as well. What we do is we have a powder coating oven, so we just stick it in there at about 90 to 100 degrees for about an hour or so, give it time to come up to temp, and then we mix them, part A and part B, equal parts, and then we go ahead and let that induce, which is just after the two have been mixed together. You let it set for about 30 to 60 minutes, 30 minutes in warm weather, 60 minutes in cold weather, at least that. Once the induction process is complete, you're ready to strain and spray just like any normal paint. So wax and grease remover, tack cloth, and then get all the little dust particles out of there as much as you can, and then get to spraying. 2 coats wet on wet. Let that dry for at least, I do 24 hours in cold weather because I don't want to rework all the stuff that I just did. And then I come back and put the seam sealer on. I let that cure for at least 24 hours as well, or at least tack up and dry. They say you can spray over it inside of 30 minutes. I don't believe that to be true. Maybe if you're an automotive repair collision shop, sure, that's good enough for you, but I like to make sure my product's underneath or on top of what I'm trying to put on is actually going to be cured before I put something else on top of it that may or may not cure or trap the solvents underneath what I just put on. So once the seam sealer is cured for at least 24 hours, we came back and we threw our third and final coat of epoxy primer on and let that cure for over 24 hours while keeping the shop at or above 65 degrees. And again, that's part metal temperature. So the shop may be 70, 75 in here. Right now it's 72. So yes, it does cost money, but it's the only way to do it properly to make sure you're not going to have to redo all this hard work that you just got through with. So now that we've got all that out of the way, we're finally ready to get busy with what we set out to do, which was to fix the undercoating. What we're going to be doing is using a product that I've used before. Again, no paid sponsorships. It is a Raptor liner. Most people use it as a truck bed coating. I've got a kit laying around here that I've had for quite a while. And we're just going to mix that up and spray it on. Unfortunately, as I was doing some reading, this stuff has an expiration date. So what that means is when they manufacture and create it, they give you a time limit to actually use it. And when you're like me and you don't use it within that time limit, it goes bad. So we can't use this. Oh, yep. That's what expires. Okay, so on the expired Raptor liner kit, anything outside of 24 months, they recommend you discard it. If you're like me, you're also cheap, so I don't want to actually discard that. What I want to do is find out what component's bad and maybe replace that component. There's two parts. There's a part A and part B, just like everything else we do here. So we're gonna figure out, I think the actual hardener is the only thing that went bad. It's either cold enough here in the shop to make it all gel up, or it's old enough to have gelled. So I don't know what the problem is. I'm not even sure you can buy that separately, but I'll check that at a later date. We will kick this aside and save it for a future project. We've got our new Raptor liner in the box right here that we're gonna get ready to mix up. I went ahead and bought the kit with the new Schutz gun. My last kit had a Schutz gun in it, and I'm not real sure that I got it good and clean, so it was only like another $10 with the applicator gun. So we're just gonna go ahead and use that. That way we know it's clean, it's fresh, it's new, and there's no clogged tips or anything like that. So what we do have to do right now is we got to tape some stuff off. So this is where the rear diff or mustache bar is located. So we're going to go ahead and tape all this stuff off, tape all the threads off. Anywhere that something mounts or bolts to, we want to tape off. This is the front diff mount for the nose of the diff, and then we have some brake line mounts for the rear. We're going to tape those off. We got some sway bar mounts. We're going to tape those off. And then here we got just this area right here. We're going to go ahead and tape this whole area off. All right, so we got the first coat on. It took just under 3 bottles. So those are 24-ounce bottles plus the 8 ounces of hardener. So whatever that is, 32 times 3, that's what it took to get the first coat of the undercarriage done. We're gonna go ahead and put on a second coat after we give this one a little time to cure. It takes 60 minutes to cure. So we're gonna wait somewhere else where it doesn't stink as bad and start a 60-minute timer. When this is all wrapped up, we'll come in and put a second coat. I'm hoping the coverage of the second coat is gonna go a little bit further. I was not expecting to use 3 bottles, but because I'm used to things not going as planned, I bought 2 new kits. So we're gonna go inside and grab the other kit. I have a whole nother 4 bottles if we need to use it. I'm hoping we don't. We got good coverage, so I just need to touch up a few areas and then put a second coat on to build a little bit of thickness so we get that that proper build that's required for the protection. I'm hoping we can get a lot more coverage out of the second coat than we did the first. It took 3 bottles. I'm hoping I can do pretty much the build coat in about 2 bottles. So that'll leave us with enough out of these 2 kits, hopefully, to do the front inner fenders as well once we get around to that. If not, I'll buy another kit. That's just how things go. So I'll be seeing you in about 60 minutes. All right, welcome back. It's been 60 minutes. The first coat has dried enough. It's gone through its 60-minute drying time. And just to give you a game plan of what we're gonna do, I went ahead and got the second kit out here. So it's over here. We're gonna get that opened up and we're gonna take at least 2 bottles out of there and go ahead and put a build coat and try to get that thickness everywhere that we put the original coat, the first coat on. That's a good base, but now we need to build it up. And to do that, we're just gonna go over everything. You'll kind of see, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but some splotching where it's a little bit thicker in some areas and a little bit thinner in some areas over here. So we're gonna try to get a little bit more even coverage. And then once all that's done, we're gonna do a texture coat. Now, a lot of people complain about streaking and or dry lines after the second coat. And then when it dries, it all looks uniform. Well, I'm gonna show you a technique that'll fix that. And it's basically just holding the gun further away and doing a texture coat or a drop coat if you're familiar with painting. Drop coating with an HVLP gun, you would turn the pressure down and basically double your distance away from the body panel and then move it about twice the speed. And what that does is it allows the paint to dry a little bit more before it hits the surface, and that gives you good even coverage when you're doing metallics and or flakes, things like that. So with this being the texture that it is, we want a nice even texture all the way around with no clumpy areas, no wet areas, no thicker areas and thinner areas. We want nice even texture. So to do that, we typically spray about 1 foot or 2 away. When we do the texture coat, we're gonna back up anywhere from 4 to 6 feet. And what that does is it gives a good wide angle pattern. The gun is recommended to shoot between 40 and 60 PSI when we're doing the texture coat. We're gonna crank that sucker all the way up to 60, possibly even higher, and double or more the distance away from the panel that we're shooting. What that's gonna do is it's gonna give us nice, even coverage, even texture, and it's gonna look fabulous. So let's go. The normal procedure for spraying the Raptor liner is to use a sweeping motion, short bursts. But when you're doing the texture coat, you actually can back off 2 to 4 feet, crank the pressure up to about 60, 65 PSI at the gun, and then use long sweeping motions, just like you would a paint gun, except you're standing further back. That allows the particles to dry just enough to get almost like an overspray, except this thing takes a lot longer to cure or dry than paint. It's still liquid once it hits it. It just gives it a nice, even, textured look. So that's how you want to take care of that. If you have any striping or streaking in your project, well, you may not be doing the underside of a car. If you're doing a bed liner, this is especially important because you're going to see that every single day. We only put 2 coats on this, and 2 coats is probably one too many. We really could have gotten by with 1 coat as just an undercarriage. But we have enough to do 2 coats, so we went ahead and threw 2 coats and a texture coat on. It's got adequate build and thickness. They don't recommend you go any thicker than 3 coats, and that will be for something like a bed liner, which this isn't. So before this stuff sets up, we need to pull all of our tape lines. So after we spray our texture coat, we give about 10 to 15 minutes to give a little rigidity to what's been sprayed on, and then we're going to go ahead and pull all the tape lines. Alright guys, the texture coat is on and went flawlessly. Now if you noticed, I used 2 different types of tapes. One is a yellow automotive body type tape that you will find at your typical automotive body supply shop. And it's specifically formulated adhesive-wise to use for 2K paints or things that cook off, shall we say. So I use that, and then I use a regular typical light brown masking tape that you would find at your regular home improvement store. And I did that for 2 reasons. One, to show you guys that sometimes I even run out of the proper stuff, and 2, that there are consequences when you don't have the right stuff. When this stuff is mixed, part A and part B, anytime you have a catalyst of anything, whether it's epoxy primer, 2-part paint, they call it 2K, or you have a part A and part B of anything, when you mix A and B, it typically creates heat. And when you use a cheap tape, any kind of heat added to that, whether it's chemically, activated, or like we're doing here with a little bit of temperature and a little bit of chemical, sometimes you can have adverse reactions to that adhesive, and that's exactly what happens when you use cheap tape. So now, in a couple spots, I'll show you, we have some adhesive remaining behind. So we're going to use a little bit of probably goof off adhesive remover, or if we have to use the hard stuff, some reducer or acetone or something like that. I really hope we don't have to go that far, but we are going to remove that adhesive at a later date. I just wanted to throw that in there for the bag of tips and tricks if you're going to tackle this project in your shop. With all that being said, I hope you had as much fun watching this as I did doing it. We appreciate you as always, and until next time, thank you so very much for watching this video.